Fear setting, a Stoic exercise. This exercise comes from Seneca. It was in his letters. And I'm going to approach this from two angles. The first angle, obviously, is going to come from Seneca and how I interpret the fear setting exercise. And the other angle, I'm just going to quickly talk about Tim Ferriss and his 3-step process, which he discusses in his TED Talk, which is actually a fabulous way to do this fear setting exercise. My interpretation of it, or how I do it, is very simple. I just ask myself quite direct questions. What am I worried about? What's the worst that can happen in this situation? Whether it's to do with a job, project, relationship, or a new opportunity. And then whatever that answer is, that's pretty much the end of the exercise for me. So if I notice my fear, I can look at that and I'm like, I'm not even worried about that. What's the worst that can happen if I quit my job? What's the worst that can happen if I don't start a business? And then I write that out. I think it's important when you're doing this exercise to come at it from two directions. First of all, you want to ask yourself what the fear is. If I don't start my business, or if I do start a business, what's the worst that can happen? Then also ask yourself the inaction question, which is, if I don't start my business, what's the worst that can happen? I think you've got to come at it from the two perspectives. Because if you just constantly ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen if I do this or if I do that, you never get the other perspective of if you don't take action, if you just sit there and do nothing. And I think it's a very key element to the fear setting exercise, because you get an extra dimension that you wouldn't get by just asking yourself it simply one way. Now, the best way to get the most results out of this exercise is to journal it. But I do find that I can tend to mentally ask myself this question quite often. I think it's a great question to have in your toolbox for when you're even sitting in a meeting, or you're on driving home, or on a bus, or whatever way you travel around the place and you're kind of overthinking a situation, to stop that overthinking and to quickly ask yourself the fear setting question. What is it about this that I'm worried about? What is the worst that can happen from the situation? Or what is the best that can happen from the situation? Even just to flip the fear on its head. Asking yourself really strong questions can have a profound effect on your life. I know that Stoicism has helped me ask good questions, or ask more good questions in my life. I started late on my personal development journey, and I find that Stoicism is a great toolbox for me to help get me forward, get me thinking about things in a different way. And this fear setting exercise definitely is one of the key elements of a Stoic practice. Doing this exercise regularly, or actually setting aside a period of time once a quarter to really get into the weeds with your life and asking these types of questions, can help you actually take more action. I know that I've started things like this channel, blog posts, and other activities in my life from asking this type of question and actually deciding, you know what, there's nothing really holding me back here. There's no organic reason for me not to try these things, or there's no real downside to it except for the mental chatter in our head. And as Seneca says, we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. And sometimes getting that imaginary worries out of our minds and onto a bit of a paper is very soothing, and it's very good to do, because you get to actually see how stupid your mind is and how you worry about the things that are just never going to come true. Now, to quickly discuss what I said I was going to at the start and discuss Tim Ferriss's, I actually have my notebook here written out with how Tim Ferriss does it, because I don't think I'd be able to remember it. He does it a little bit different. He sets it out in a way that he has three questions, and then the first question has like 3 parameters across it. And he will go out into the future to say, how is this going to look in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 3 years? So he really goes in depth. And his first question, obviously, it's, what if I quit my job? What if I start a business? What if I break up with this person? Define your worry, define your fear. Then he asks you to do once you've got your question. How do you prevent that? And then how do you repair it? So he's got three things. He's got define the fear from the question that you had. How do you prevent that from happening? And then how would you repair it if it happened? And what you'll actually find if you answer those questions, that usually any problem that comes up in your life, sort of your daily, weekly, monthly sort of success problems or business problems or personal problems. No, we're not talking about big, serious life problems, but you probably could use this on that as well. There's usually a pretty simple fix for these. Once he's gone through that part of the exercise, the second part, he asks the question, has anybody ever in the history of the human race had to deal with this before? I actually find this a great question to ask anyway. Without actually doing the fear setting exercises, to think about this when you are in a difficult situation or you are struggling with something, just to ask that question. Is there a resource out there where somebody has dealt with this before that can help me? 99% of the times, the answer is most likely going to be yes. Unless you're trying to fly to Mars. And I don't know if we've actually got a human to Mars yet, so people haven't quite worked that out. But 99% of other problems that we deal with, there's probably a podcast, a YouTube channel, a book, a seminar, a friend that has already dealt with the situation. So asking yourself that question can be super useful, and it might even get you to reach out to somebody in your network, and all of a sudden you're collabing with somebody to solve a problem that you were worried about, which is great. And then the last part of Tim Ferriss's exercise is the cost of inaction. Again, the exercise as a whole is very important, but even if you separate these three ideas from Tim Ferriss's sort of setting a question out to asking, has anybody else ever done it before, to the last one here of what if I don't take any action? What's the worst that can happen? Asking those questions separately, just on their own about situations, is very, very valuable. But when you combine it into this exercise, it's super powerful. Now, do I do this every time I want to do a fear setting exercise? No. I tend to lean more towards a very quick touch point. I have done Tim Ferriss's exercise a couple of times over the last couple of years since I first learned about it from on his podcast and then his TED Talk. And I think it was his book, Tools of Titan, and then the TED Talk. But it's not something that I really use once a quarter. He recommends doing that. I think it's really good to use if you've got a lot of stuff going on and you're really trying to get past some issues and problems in your life. But I tend to use my sort of high level, ask a quick question mentally or a quick journal session rather than getting really deep into it. And I find that it might not give me the depth that I need, and I probably should do it more regularly, but I do find just asking that question maybe in the morning with my coffee and quickly journaling for a couple of minutes does help move things forward and reminds me that, as I've mentioned, we definitely suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. Let me know what you think of this video, and let me know below in the comments if you have used any kind of questions like this before, or if you've done Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Also, if you like this video, hit that like button for me, help the algorithm and all that. Also, don't forget to subscribe and follow along and get lots more content. My mission here is to help those that start late get started. I talk about Stoicism, I talk about business, I talk about marketing, I talk about supplements, and a whole bunch of other things as I try to get the direct experience, reading the books, learning the material, and discussing it here on this channel. Thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you next time. And as always, make it a good one.